Hi guys, this is gsn.com and I'm here with the Bluboo S1 handset for a full review. As you can see, it's a very spectacular device on account of its edge-to-edge display. The maker of the phone, Bluboo, praises its 90% screen-to-body ratio, and the Bluboo S1 can be found on aliexpress.com for $170. It debuted this summer in July and it's an edge-to-edge glass sandwich. It reminds me of the Xiaomi Mi Mix a bit, which is a pretty big compliment for such an affordable mid-range phone, available in black or white. So let's first discuss its design. It's quite a wide phone, which makes it not the best to use with a single hand. It's got comfy buttons on the side, although a bit clicky and a bit noisy, and once again it has glass at the front, glass at the back side, and at the sides it feels pretty much like plastic rather than metal. It's a bit slippery, but luckily we have a bundled case to give it more grip. It's got a premium feel, and I would say that the thickness is okay at 7.9 millimeters, although some other sites, some other retailers list it at 8.7 millimeters, so the truth is around 8 millimeters. It weighs a pretty reasonable 169 grams for its 5.5 inch diagonal, and in the end it's unique for sure. It feels like a chocolate candy bar of sorts, all black and elegant with so much glass. People would adore it at below $200. 2.5D glass at the front, extremely narrow bezels, very small earpiece here, and the front camera has been moved to the bottom. Aside from being slippery, I would say that the design is a-okay in my book. Now, as far as the screen is concerned, we're getting here a 5.5 incher 2.5D IPS LCD made by Sharp, and it's a full HD screen. We put it to the test using the gallery because we do not have a dedicated video player, and that's what the playback looks like. Extremely immersive thanks to the small bezels. So we got good brightness. I would say the color calibration is okay, contrast not bad, and we got wide view angles. Now let's see how the screen did in our other tests. We put it below the microscope, achieved the RGB stripes pixel arrangement, that's what we measured, and then we measured the brightness, reaching a pretty solid 455 lux units, which is quite bright and quite solid. It beats the Asus Zenfone 3 Deluxe and the Sony Xperia XA, for example, but scores below the Motorola Moto Z and the Huawei P9. Now, of course, you can tweak the screen, and you can do that from here. You go to the display and you got your mirror vision settings. There's a ton of them. First of all, the modes: standard, vivid, and user mode. And user mode lets you tweak contrast, saturation, brightness, sharpness, color temperature. There's also dynamic contrast and blue light defender. I would recommend you stick to standard mode though. Now we go further and see other options. We got brightness level, got sleep mode, screensaver, navigation bar, font size, display size, and something called free touch, which is basically this floating widget with a ton of options. Now that the screen is done and dusted, and it's quite a solid screen, let's go to the other aspects, like for example the CPU choice. Now this phone opts for a MediaTek Helio P25 octa-core CPU, and it also uses the Mali T880 GPU plus 4GB of RAM and 64GB of storage plus a micro SD card slot, and it does not suffer from lag, not one trace of lag. I've used it a bunch of times. I've opened up many apps on it. I also took photos, played games, did a ton of things, and no trace of lag. Although after playing games for a long while, you may experience a slowdown of the system. Speaking of games, this is Riptide GP Renegade, our typical benchmark game we use to test phones here at gsn.com, and it ran and behaved like a champ. You also play the first-person shooter on it. It's called Deadheads. It's fun and zero trace of lag plus solid graphics. After all, the Helio P25 is a pretty good mid-range CPU from MediaTek. Here we go. Nice looking water in this Riptide. 4GB of RAM, also nice to have on a phone, below $200. You can feel a bit of a pull of the directional area, maybe a bit towards the left. That's only a bit of my impression. I would say okay controls, good frame rate, nice lighting and texture and shadows, so no problem with the gaming. Close this up and see how the benchmarks were handled on this beautiful edge-to-edge machine. We go to the screenshots and we did the usual analysis of quadrant and Antutu and so forth. In quadrant we had pretty good scores, beating the HTC 10 and Xperia XA1 Ultra, but scoring below the Sony Xperia XA1. Now in Antutu, let's see what happened. So should find it here somewhere. This is the Antutu score, 3K points. This is actually superior to the Huawei P9 Lite and the Motorola Moto M, but inferior to the HTC One A9 and the Huawei P9 Lite 2017. In general, we were kept between the P9 Lite from last year and the P9 Lite from this year, benchmark wise. We also did a Geekbench. Those are the scores. The single core one beats the Moto Z Play, the multi-core one beats the Huawei Nova Plus, but scored below the Xperia X Compact. Now, if you're wondering about the temperature, here it is. We scored 39.9 degrees Celsius after running the game Riptide GP Renegade, which is almost overheating but not quite. And when we ran the intensive benchmark GFX bench, we scored 37.2, so okay-ish, no overheating here. On the battery front, this glass sandwich has a 3500 mAh lithium polymer unit, and we did a video playback test and a continuous usage test, and let's see what came out of those. So first of all, we did the continuous video playback test, which is pretty underwhelming. At 7 hours and 19 minutes it's weak, but it beats the Huawei P9 and the Lumia 950 XL. Still, it's below 141 other phones we've tested, including the LG Nexus 5X. It sort of makes up for it with the continuous usage, 8 hours and 5 minutes, which is basically a way of saying you can play games for 8 hours without a problem. Beats the Galaxy S7, HTC U11, but scores below the Huawei Nova and the Galaxy J5 2016. The charging is, I would say, medium level, 2 hours and 25 minutes. It's superior to the HTC One M8 and the Lenovo Vive X3. After 5 minutes of charging, you're at 4%, after 30 minutes of charging, 33%, and after 1 hour, 68%. Of course, we have special settings for the battery. Nothing fancy here. We got performance and power saving with a normal mode and sports mode. Sports is probably code for gaming. Standby intelligent power saving is here. A regular battery saver is here. And there is also battery optimization, so we are fully covered by some basically stock options. Now, on the acoustics front, interestingly, there is no audio jack, but you did get a special adapter from USB Type-C to 3.5mm jack. And in spite of seeing two grills here, only the right one is actually the speaker. Got a pretty old school music player. I'm not very happy about its interface. At least we have the equalizer, which is, by the way, stock. We got your custom genres here, 5 custom channels, bass boost, surround sound and preset reverb. But let's give it a spin and see what it can render. So as you just saw, the equalizer actually makes it work. So in the end, I would say that the experience is reasonably loud. There's no distortion, no back vibration, decent bass, and even the high notes are okay, and the voice also nice. Not the highest volume in the world, but still quite okay. No bundled headphones with the phone, but still at least we get the FM radio. And now it's time to go to the gallery again and see how it handled our decibel meter test, because that's how we measure the sound quality, decibel meter. So we achieved a pretty unimpressive 82.2 decibels at the front and the back side with our audio sample, superior to the Motorola Moto G4 but inferior to the Yumi Touch. And then we played the game you saw before, which is Riptide GP Renegade, and achieved a pretty impressive 94.1 decibels, which is superior to the Galaxy S8 even, so that's a good feature. And by the way, if you want an extra kick, you can go here to the sound, activate sound enhancement, go to BES BES loudness, so you can get an extra kick from your speaker. And that's about it on the acoustics front. Now it's time to analyze the cameras. There's 3 of them. There's a dual camera at the back. There's a 13 megapixel shooter and a 3 megapixel shooter. The secondary one is for depth capture, and the front one is a 5 megapixel shooter placed at the bottom because there's no room at the top. You can do interpolation, so the 13 megapixel camera takes 16 megapixel shots and the camera UI goes like this. I would say it's a pretty typical experience. We got your effects here. We got your modes here, talking about video, there's photo, there's something that mimics 2x optical zoom, it's not optical of course. Face beauty, there's blur, which is basically the way of triggering bokeh. There's a pro mode with exposure, ISO and white balance, panorama, and even a mono mode, which lets you take black and white shots. I would say typical interface, nothing fancy, nothing extra from the usual experience. Now let's go to the gallery and see how the camera handled our test. So first of all, let me talk about the selfies. They're a bit underwhelming because they're very grainy, burned by the sun and totally unimpressive, and you are recommended to keep the phone like this when you're taking the selfies because the camera is here. So not the comfiest and also not the best. As you can see, not the best details, colors or texture. So selfies, big no-no. Now let's talk about the other regular shots. One of the best features of the phone is the fact that you can take some pretty nice close-ups. I'm talking about details, quality, texture and all that. But if you try to apply the blur effect, well, you'll see that bokeh is actually triggered, well, like an imitation of the feature. It's not actual bokeh, and I have a feeling that the secondary camera is not even used because it all happens so fast. That's an example of using the 2x zoom feature. The good thing, you don't have to pinch to zoom. The bad thing, not the best quality in the world. I'm happy with the colors, excuse me. I'm also happy with the lighting, and once again, close-ups are quite excellent here. But when you try to implement that blur thingy, you'll see not everything is optimal. And every once in a while, about every, let's say, 8 shots or so, you'll be met with some blur. Also some burn on account of the 30+ degrees, and this is one example of the blur shot. It's supposed to be bokeh, it's actually blur in the background and clear in the foreground, and that's about it. More shots here. In general, we're happy with the quality for a mid-range phone, nothing bad here. The only two problems are the selfies and the fact that there are some blur shots, and let's say there are 3 problems. The fact that bokeh does not convince us. These are the monochrome shots. They're not the kind of monochrome you achieved via hardware, like on the Huawei P9 or the P10. They're achieved via software. Not bad, I have to say that this is the conclusion, not bad shots. So too bad that the selfies couldn't cope with it. We actually took some excellent captures. These close-ups of a candle within a glass are some of the best I've taken the whole summer. So this tells you something about the potential of the phone. Overall, I feel that general quality is on par with the Vernitor and also the Huawei Honor 6 and maybe the latest ZTE Nubias we tested, but it's below the Huawei P9 Lite and the P10 Lite. That's during the daytime. Let's see the low light capture, which we have separately here. So low light capture is here and it brings a pretty poor flash. That's what I noticed. Not very bright, and things get a bit blurry and a bit violet and red here and there. I would say the lighting is decent. You'll lose a lot of details when zooming in, that's for sure. The lights are a bit ghostly when you catch them. I'm talking about the street lights, which appear here. It's true, they don't have giant halos like on other phones, but still a bit ghostly and a bit foggy, as you can see at the first sign of zoom. Not happy with the violet hue, but for a phone below $200, I would say they're decent, and maybe some of them are even Facebook worthy. Black and white ones look quite fine, and this feels like it's inferior to 80% of the mid-range phones we test in the end. At least the lighting was decent. Now, we only talked about the photos so far. We also took videos. Sadly, not the best format in the world. It's 3GPP, Full HD, 30 frames per second, 17 mega per second, and it goes something like this. Let's find one of the videos and show you. Still searching, and here we go. So one big problem of the camera, constant refocusing. Every 2 or 3 seconds it feels the need to refocus, and the exposure change is a bit violent and sudden. Clarity is okay, and the microphone cannot handle the wind. I would say there's some burn here and there, but in general the colors kept me happy with the calibration. Stabilization, certainly not the strong suit of the phone. And let's proceed to other videos, like this one with more color. Once again, refocus from the first second. Good colors and clarity, a bit of burn, problems with dynamic range in the background. So it's too bad that the refocus happens, because I was happy with the clarity and the colors. I feel the need to recommend you try and use maybe another camera app because maybe that one will get rid of the constant refocusing. This also happens during the night, only things are much worse here. 9 frames per second, everything moves in frames, 6 mega per second, laggy, slow, blurry, violet, object tracking is poor, so the video is underwhelming totally. It feels below what, let's say, Huawei Honor 7 or the HTC Desire 10 Lifestyle can achieve, or maybe at that level. We're done with the camera. The conclusion, the dual camera feels like a gimmick, even more so than other phones. Now let's go to the browser. This is the pre-installed browser. Of course, you can use Chrome, nobody stops you. And we got here this pre-installed keyboard, which is a third-party keyboard with big buttons and a lot of customizations. We got themes, we got add-ons. The pre-installed browser is not the best in the world, which is proved by its poor benchmarks. Takes a while to load, but the zoom and the scroll is quite fluid. That's the keyboard once again. It features a sort of swipe, although it doesn't trace your actual patterns. These are the options. And now let's move further to the connectivity. So at the bottom, USB Type-C, there is no trace of audio jack here, and this is a dual SIM nano SIM phone. And interestingly, I tried to connect with an USB Type-C cable from a Sony Xperia phone. It wasn't compatible, so it's the USB Type-C 2.0 kind, not 3.0. We got 4G, we got Bluetooth 4.0, we got GPS and GLONASS, and let's see what else. There's HotNot, and from what I can see, no trace of NFC. Now the calls were pretty loud and clear, but I've heard much louder volume on other phones. I would say the volume is rather mid-level. We also have Wi-Fi A, B, G, and here, and as you probably expected, we also did some connectivity tests, and color me surprised because we actually got excellent results. So 92 mega per second in 4G downloads and 67 mega per second uploads. In Wi-Fi 102 mega per second downloads, 25 mega per second uploads, so pretty impressive in my book. Now that the connectivity checks out, let's see what software we're dealing with here. It's Android 7.0 Nougat with some tweaks and customizations from Bluboo, not excessive, but they're still there. For example, the leftmost home screen is dedicated to a sort of Google Now alternative. You got your news, you got your topics, commonly used apps, and some services like food discounts and bus stops. Then you got your multitasking via carousel, and you can even pull off multitasking via split screen. So press this, the screen is split in two, and you can browse the gallery and the web at the same time. And then you can go back to your normal usage pattern. Drop down section includes the notifications and quick settings. And then if you keep the home screen pressed, you'll get your beauty center, wallpapers, widgets, and launcher settings. Beauty center is basically an area for themes. Widgets are, most of them, stock. And launcher settings have to do with transitions more than anything else. Well, other than that, I guess it's time to go to the settings, which are pretty straightforward. Connectivity, display, notifications, sound, apps, storage, memory, gesture motions, telephony motions, system motions. You can do a double tap to wake, you can draw letters on the screen to trigger a variety of apps, and finally we have the fingerprint scanner, which can also be used to stop or start a song, answer calls, take a photo, and something like that. So fingerprint manager is here. That's how you secure the phone. And sadly, it's one of the most inaccurate fingerprint scanners I've seen. It's available here. I wouldn't say it's actually a home button, it's just a capacitive touch sensor, because we have the buttons here. They're virtual ones. There's a 12-step setup process. The fingerprint has been added, and here we go. Okay, so first try usually requires the pin. Now there's no excuse. Okay, one more time. You have to keep it on much longer than I've seen on other phones. On other phones you just did that and it was enough. Well, it's also enough here sometimes, but not very constant, as you can see. So every now and then it works fine, but every now and then it doesn't. As far as the pre-installed apps go, I counted them all. There's actually a decent number, 28, which is not bloatware, luckily. The most useful app is probably System Manager with Power Manager, Rubbish Clean, Freezing Room app, Auto Boot, App Lock, and Auto Clean. So that's the things you're getting here. As far as the apps are concerned, there is your calculator, calendar, Chrome, clock, this one for alerts of security or other things like that, file manager, FM radio, Gmail, Play Store, and basic package, I'd say. Now it's time for the verdict for the Bluboo S1, one of the few really edge-to-edge phones we've tested here at gsndon.com. So on the pro side, we got a pretty well-built phone. It's a glass sandwich with an excellent price, bright screen, an immersive screen for that matter, okay performance, okay PC mark and continuous usage, not bad acoustics. I would say the pictures are okay, those taken during the daytime and especially the close-ups, and the connectivity was actually above my expectations. Now those are the pros. Now on the con side, the phone is slippery, and the continuous video playback time should be better, so battery could be a bit better. The dual camera did not convince me. It feels like a singular camera with an extra cam for nothing. Selfies are underwhelming, some pictures are blurry, video is poor in general, and I would say that the fingerprint scanner is inaccurate. In the end, for a phone below $200, it's very hard to buy something more beautiful than this one, except if you want to buy maybe this Sony Xperia XA1, but this takes it to a whole new level. The lack of proper video capture and the fingerprint scanner are possibly the biggest bummers here. Other than that, the performance is fine, so if you buy this for gaming, you should be happy enough with it. Maybe if you try to avoid using it for too much time and maybe some overheating. In the end, people will buy it for the design, for the gaming, for the fact it has Android Nougat without too much bloatware, and in the end you can take some pretty decent macros as we did here at gsndon.com. So this has been the review of the Bluboo S1 phone. You can find it on AliExpress for $170. Bye bye.